Right after the break, we're going to interview Eric Weihenmayer, who climbed the highest mountain in the world, Mount Everest. But he's gay. He's gay, excuse me, he's blind. So we'll hear about that coming up.
Okay, as we head to the break, a look at the 6 o'clock.
So the best piece of news reporting ever done, in my opinion.
But on the topic of you have to be a complete garbage, dookie soul of a human being to do this.
You're an emotional fucking cripple. Your soul is dog shit. Every single fucking thing about you is ugly.
And in this episode, we are going to be laying this out. Only garbage human beings climb Everest. And you can be like, oh no, this is a direct attack. And yeah, it is a direct attack. If you did this, you're a shitty human being. But not for the typical reasons. And here I will post a guy who makes one of the typical arguments against climbing Everest.
Oh, yeah.
Which is just Sherpas die and are forced to do this. And that is bad. And then at the end of the video, I will explain why that is a terrible argument that climbing Everest is immoral.
Real issue behind climbing Everest these days, which is the fact that if you climbed Everest in 2023, you essentially sacrificed the lives of 6 local people in order to do so. The season began with 3 deaths of Sherpas who were carrying ropes and gear through the Khumbu icefall, fixing lines and ladders through the glacier. That is a task that has to be completed each year if anyone is going to climb the mountain on the regular route. The deceased local workers can expect to receive only about $10,000 as a payout from life insurance. Ridiculous. To put that into perspective, $10,000 is barely enough to cover the rising costs of living for a small family in Nepal. One estimate I read was that $10K is enough to only keep the family afloat for about 2 years. Now, there were 7 Nepali deaths on the mountain this year. 6 of them were working, all of them Sherpas.
Because it's not a very good argument when you actually look at the statistics. They have some credence to it, but pretty low. For me, the core reason why climbing Everest is so selfish was elucidated very loudly when I was talking to my dad.
We're talking, I think, about inherent values or something like that.
Yeah, I was talking about what do you live for? Like what's a good life to you, etc. And I was arguing that he focuses a lot on trying to maximize the aesthetics of being an erudite person or some sort of aesthetic version of who he is. And when he's making decisions, he is making them based on how they change his internal perspective on himself instead of how they impact the world around him. And I view this as a very, very selfish way to live.
You were like, and I'm doing this research for an episode on how terrible it is to climb Mount Everest. And I'm like, well, at least Mount Everest is the highest mountain. At least it's not like Kilimanjaro. That's just like complete trash. Like the view is nothing. If you're just walking up a dirty mountain, like across like gross, you need like separate shoes just for like the bathrooms because there's poop smeared everywhere. Just a disgusting experience. And you're just shuffling your way up because the guides don't let you walk quickly or anything. So it's incredibly boring. And he's like, well, no, I've summoned Mount Kilimanjaro. Like, and I was like, oh no. And then it was like several times.
I told him, I was like, but Dad, like, why would you do that? Like, what good does this bring to the world? This seems to be entirely based on masturbating sort of a self-image of yourself. So he immediately goes, no, I didn't do it for that reason. He couldn't come up with another reason he had done it.
No.
But he said, I didn't do it for that reason.
No.
He said, well, the one other reason he came up with was you do it to experience hardship. And I was like, bitch, you're the one who just spent all day complaining about our house being too cold. That is an area where we are creating hardship for ourselves, but saving money, which can go to making the world a better place. Whereas you can't endure the minor hardships of daily life, which make the world a better place, but are able to undergo big performative hardships that end up costing a lot of money and time that you could spend on improving the world. But then he goes talking about his wife.
They were in Aspen and she bragged to him about going for quite a few kilometers at a high altitude. And he's like, well, but have you gone 100 kilometers at this higher altitude? And she's like, I don't even know where you would do that. And then he's like, well,
Mount Kilimanjaro, which I climbed 3 times. And I was like, Dad, you just argued to me that you didn't do this just for signaling purposes. And literally in the next sentence, you go off on a tangent about how you dunked on somebody in a signaling manner for climbing the mountain. It is very clear you only did this to signal to yourself
To
the
one
type
up.
of person you are.
Yeah.
And that's
To one's own wife, which is not even like, who are you? Like, you don't need to.
like, what are
They
you even
married
doing
you.
this for? Right.
You
Like,
won. Yeah.
and so before we get further in this is my core complaint about this. Is that it has such high costs. And we'll go over all of the high costs, whether they are to yourself or to the environment or to money that you are not spending on making the world a better place for such trivial differential benefits. And by here, a differential benefit is that somebody goes, well, what about the hardship of climbing Mount Everest? And I'm like, there are hardships that you can endure equivalent to climbing Mount Everest that don't put random people's lives at risk, don't waste tons of money, that don't waste years of your life, that actively make the world a better place. So why did you choose this hardship over those hardships? Because of the signaling ability it gave you. Or they'll say, well, what about like the views? It's like, well, you can look at a picture or go in a VR simulation. We have those these days. And they're like, it's not the same. And I'm like, yeah, it's not the same because you're not freezing your butt off. You're not undergoing permanent brain damage, which, by the way, you do undergo. Almost everyone who climbs Everest undergoes permanent brain damage. I'm going to put 2 studies on screen here. Only 1 in 13 Everest climbers had normal MRI scans. So you have a less than 10% probability of not undergoing permanent brain damage. And this
Wow. I didn't know that. So you're really screwing yourself up by going.
Oh, yeah. You're not just wasting tons of money. You're not just putting other people's lives at risk. You are permanently fucking up your brain. And this was true 3 years later. They did follow-up scans on these people.
So permanent damage.
Permanent damage, almost like everyone who goes. Specifically, you have frontal subcortical lesions, you have microhemorrhages, you have cortical atrophy, the loss of brain tissue, you have enlargement of the Verrica-Robin spaces, fluid-filled spaces surrounding blood vessels, you have subcortical lesions, white matter hyperintensities, you have reduced white matter density and volume, reduced gray matter density and volume in specific regions of the brain. And what does this end up looking like? You typically have a loss of memory, both short-term and long-term, and barbiopsychia, which is a slowness of thought. So you think slower afterwards.
So you are slightly retarding yourself for the rest of your life just to be able to tell people that you climb Mount Everest.
And a lot of people are willing to do that.
I mean, you already have to be so damaged.
Unfortunately, other people's lives at risk, slightly retarding themselves for the rest of their life. And they're not even showing that they have done anything of particular difficulty anymore.
Aside from spend a lot of money. Yeah.
You could just spend a ton of money. And, there's been instances that we'll talk about, like,
I kid you not, that guy you just saw being carried down from Everest in a sack, that guy is the same guy who you're about to see on tour. And during this, he didn't even thank the Sherpa who took him down.
T. Ravichandran intends to proudly wave the Jalo Gamilang flag at the summit of all the world's tallest mountains. It does not matter if the mountain is steep or if he has to squeeze in between narrow crevices. He will not forget to carry the Malaysian flag with him.
The first thing that we put on our tent is the Jalo Gamilang. So it's about pride.
He hopes the government will recognize his contributions to the nation and will call on him to say a few words on Merdeka Day.
Wow! Look how far I climbed, and I'm not even tired. Wake up, you lazy Sherpas! We've got a mountain to climb.
So there's the one instance that I learned about last year this is a 2012 instance of Shreya Shah Chlorphine, who was a Canadian who basically had no reason to have anyone permit her to climb Mount Everest in terms of her experience and her training. But she just basically paid so much to an outfit that was like, yeah, sure. Well, whatever you say, you want to pay that much? Okay, let's do this. Because you can always get someone, who's going to be like, everyone has a price. And that's the problem is now I think Everest is really full of unscrupulous climbing outfits. They will just take about anyone. And she, by the way, perished in the dead zone on her way back down from the top on a uniquely crowded day because she ran out of oxygen, because she used up way too much, because she wasn't fit to climb this mountain. So that's the other problem.
Other people have made it down, but have like screwed up other people's ascents. So there was another influencer, Ravi Chandra, who was also found in the dead zone. He apparently was by himself there, and some other team had to abandon their ascent to pick him up and bring him down. And he ended up not even thanking them, thanking like his insurance company and sponsors, and like pretending that didn't happen in like his tour about his climb. But he made it to the top. And if you look at the pictures of this, and I'll play some video of this.
Camp 2, where I witnessed the most extreme and large lines of the entire season. As we were at Camp 2, we could see every single team that was ahead of us moving up from Camp 3 to Camp 4. I mean, my teammate Tyler described it as a black mamba, and there's just no other better way to describe that thing. If you saw a viral video of lines on Everest this year, this is most likely where it took place. And these same people went up to the summit together, and that just created even more lines, which were all documented as well.
The lines. Everywhere you go. People, crowds, but all the lines. All the lines. And then there get to be so many people that they make fast pass. You stand in line to get a ticket to stand in line later. Then there's lines for the bathrooms, lines for the drinks, lines for cantankerous and rare cantankerous things.
It's just lines and lines. It's a corporatized thing now. You are going to the top to wait in line for an hour to spend a few seconds on the top of a mountain.
Well, and what makes things worse is the inexperienced climbers make the line long because they slow everyone else down.
Yeah. And you're risking your potential life and any other good you could do with your life. 1% to 2% of climbers who attempt to summit die. So you're risking your life. You're blowing tons of money. How much money? $30,000 to $160,000. Although the sort of median range is $50,000 to $60,000 per ascent.
So that's like an Oxbridge Masters. That good like year spent doing some really fun studying in a gorgeous place.
Yeah, you could be doing productive work. You could be doing productive research.
Well,
you could
just want to do something indulgent. That's what I would do with that money if I like had nothing
you could
to do with
even
my
just
life.
I would respect somebody more who spent that money just partying for a year. They would do less damage to their brain.
A better story. It would be more fun, more interesting. Yeah.
More interesting than I waited in line for ages.
No, honestly, you'll probably do more good, like getting shit-faced and, like doing crazy things, as long as you don't drive or anything. Yeah.
Right. But the point here being is that there's a lot you can do with $60,000 that is good for the world. Like if you don't spend that on yourself, for somebody in a developing country, that can feed dozens of families.
Oh, that's game-changing money. Yes.
That could be spent on medical research. That could be, it is not like, oh, I'm just spending this on myself, whatever. It is, I am choosing this to spend on myself for a completely self-indulgent reason. And I know, like, when I self-indulge, like I play video games, that costs money, right? That doesn't make the world a better place. But I understand that I should be ashamed of that. Okay? I wouldn't brag to somebody about how much video games I play, or, I wouldn't brag to somebody that I had wasted the time to like beat a Dark Souls game on whatever, like that is a sign of my failing as a human being. Okay. My failing to vanity, my failing to addictive loops, my failing to the worst thing you can do is to treat your sins as if they are virtues, because it leads to terrible decisions, like we see in the case of Everest. Now, let's go over the costs of climbing Everest in terms of like the world. All right.
Okay.
So body retrieval. There are approximately 200 bodies on Everest. Removing bodies typically costs between $30,000 and $70,000 per body. In some cases, they can reach $100,000 or more. It requires 6 to 10 Sherpas working for most of a day to bring down a single body. So that's in addition to all of these costs. Frozen bodies can weigh significantly more than their original weight due to attached ice.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Oh, Like when you have a slightly, something out of the freezer and it's all caked with, not good.
Yeah, and these have to be brought all the way down.
Mm.
Helicopters typically can't land above Camp 2, so you're bringing these down significant distances, risking the life of everyone who's carrying this body. This is a huge risk to them. And also that person who died unceremoniously had a chance at bragging rights. Had a chance to challenge themselves in a way that was pointlessly dangerous, pointlessly damaging, pointlessly expensive, just so that we know, oh, there's the body of somebody who would rather pay, at minimum, $20,000 to masturbate.
Okay, but why can't we just create a body dumpster on Everest, just out of the way? Because it's an eyesore. Like, I don't get, like, I understand that it is an eyesore to the tourists, but honestly, they're kind of there to see the dead bodies. I say it's a feature, not a bug, right? As long as they're out of the way, just make a giant pile, and then you have the benefit of having them see what assholes they are on the way down. I don't know why we're risking.
You want to create a dump at the top of Everest near one of the base camps? This is a holy mountain to the Nepalese people.
Yeah, and this shows, don't mess with the mountain. Here's the giant pile of bodies to show what the mountain is claimed.
No, you may misunderstand how holy the mountain is. So for Sherpas, for example, some of them have to spend like 5 hours a day on off season doing prayers just to ritually cleanse themselves for the sin of going on to the mountain. It is a very bad thing to do. To lead bodies and to understand the size of the trash heaps up there as well. There's an estimated 40 to 50 metric tons of debris. This
like
includes,
oxygen canisters, and I'm sure people just dump them at the top. They don't care because you're about to die or something. You don't really.
Well, the teams are very selfish about this. It's even a common practice for teams to cut the logos out of their tents so they can just leave them at the top without being traced back to them.
Oh, that's so screwed up.
My expedition leader, Garrett Madison, actually commented about how some teams will cut their logo out of their tents, so when they go down and they don't need a tent anymore, they can just leave theirs there. Because how is it going to be traced back to them? There's no repercussions.
And Camp 4 is now described as an actual dump, quote unquote, with piles of trash being left behind by descending summit teams emitting a foul odor. So you are staying in a camp that smells like you're staying in a dump.
Pushing right beneath the death zone at Camp 4, it was an actual dump. Like, simply put, this place was trashed. Just look at this video I filmed, I can barely name most of the things that are in this shot. It even smelled horrible up there, which is very weird because at altitude I lose my sense of smell, but I walked in there and it smelled like something. I don't even know what.
And now you might have like a corpse pile near it. Bring in some necromancers, right?
That's why I said the dead zone. They'll all stay refrigerated there. They're not going to thaw out in the dead zone.
Even on the summit, people have found things like Coke bottles. Just like,
drinking a Coke at the summit. Gee whiz.
And to get them on, people are dying cleaning this up. So, for example, a Sherpa died during a cleanup operation of trash from Camp 4. And per a Sherpa, a soldier in the Nepalese army died at Camp 3 while participating in a trash removal effort. So, yeah, so you're staying at dump sites, sitting around in lines. Like the people who tell me they're doing this for like the awe and majesty of it, it's like, I've seen the pictures. Okay. You're clearly not. There are other mountains that, there are other things you can do. I wouldn't even say mountains, which I view as a very self-masturbatory thing to do. There are other things you can do that don't require all of this. I just hate self-image augmentation through expensive acts. Like that's, I think, when you know that your moral compass and the moral compass of the society that has raised you has just gone completely off the deep end. Now, I want to get into the arguments around Sherpas. And is this immoral because of the Sherpas diet?
I just looked up Mount Kilimanjaro toilets, and now I understand why you have to have a separate pair of shoes. It's just shit everywhere. Yeah, no, like all the popular mountains are gross. Don't why? Why would you go onto them? In a theme park, they're literally repainting overnight because there's so much gross stuff smeared onto the walls and whatnot. You don't want to go somewhere where there's a lot of foot traffic and not a huge amount of infrastructure to clean that stuff. Not sanitary.
Yeah, and it's like, why can't you just undergo the hardship of climbing a local mountain? It's likely just as beautiful. You don't have to put other people's lives at risk. You don't have
All the
big
Mr. Ballin
rankings.
videos, though, like, I think you and I would probably agree that it's just irresponsible to go out hiking. Because keep in mind, there's all these Mr. Ballin and other, like, missing 411 stories about people who go out hiking and they want to go show off how, like, rugged they are, and then they die. And then a bunch of people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions of taxpayer money, local taxpayer money, to find these yahoos who go out, even, seasoned explorers and stuff. It's not.
I am
it's not worth it.
okay
It's a
with
tax on society.
things designed to teach people and kids how to live outdoors and off the land. That is not Everest.
Yeah,
with
but you
your
can do
North
that
Face
without
mountain
going into the
oxygen.
wilderness. You can do that in a safe nearby space where you're easy to find with cell phone coverage.
And I point out that we are not like anti-outdoor people. My dad was on the board of like Outward Bound.
Outward Bound, yeah.
And you used to work as a river guide.
I was never paid. I was too young to be paid.
You were too young to be paid, but you did do this every summer. You go be a river raft guide, and you still have the voice for it. Like when she goes into river guide voice, it's shocking to a lot of people because she can like get this booming voice out of nowhere that's very commanding, and that she kept having to use it around our wedding because people like were doing it and saying, go to the. Anyway, I want to get here to the Sherpa argument because I find this one more nuanced,
okay,
and less obvious than just a why are you wasting time on something that obviously brings no good to the world and it's just self-masturbatory. So, and here I would note that my criticism of climbing things like Mount Everest does not attach to people who are doing it for things that clearly have value. I.e., if you're going up as a research team, that yeah, I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, research. But like that's such a minority of people doing it that like I don't need to, really pontificate on that.
Well, yeah. Are you questioning Sherpas? I mean,
No, hold on. What I'm questioning here is the reason that climbing Everest is immoral because Sherpas die doing it. I think that's a minor reason, not the primary reason. And I'll get into the argument here, okay?
Okay.
First, the ratio of Sherpas to clients has increased significantly. In the early 1990s, the ratio was 1 Sherpa to every 5 clients. Today, it's coming to have 2 Sherpas per client, and in another statistic, I heard 1.62 Sherpas per client.
Wow.
So what you're seeing here is the number of Sherpas has exploded and per client because it's just so easy to do it now. Because they just have these huge like teams around some individuals who are doing it. So somebody telling you I climbed Everest doesn't really mean anything anymore. You've got the diploma mill of Everest now. As for the Sherpas themselves, and here's the argument that, okay, but this is really bad. You are needlessly risking people's lives. Sherpas had 4,053 deaths per 100,000 full-time workers. Avalanches are the primary cause of Sherpa deaths for 46.4%. So around half the Sherpas that die, there's just nothing you can really do to avoid avalanches if you're climbing Everest. It's not like they messed up or something. It's just a statistical.
And it's, I guess, not disproportionately. An avalanche takes out everyone in its path. It's not because they're carrying stuff.
If you're talking about 4,000 Sherpa deaths for 100,000 workers, how did that compare to other high-risk professions? U.S. soldiers in Iraq, 335 deaths per 100,000 workers. For Alaskan bush pilots, another one of the most dangerous jobs out there, 287 deaths. Commercial fishermen, 124 deaths. Miners, 25 deaths per 100,000. So Sherpas are a astronomically more dangerous profession than like compared to anything else. You're talking about for active U.S. soldiers in an active war zone, it's 335 versus 4,053 for Sherpas.
Yeah, that's really
this is
bad.
many multiples more dangerous than being in an active war zone for these individuals.
Wow. Okay, I didn't realize it was that bad. I mean, I get why they do it because you can make so much more working on Everest than doing pretty much, and just by such an order of magnitude than anything else in the area. It's really tempting. But God, what a hazard. That's terrible.
Yeah.
You know. but then you're going to die. It's not good.
Now,
Oh,
why do I hate this argument, right?
okay.
So the obvious counter argument to this is, yeah, and the Sherpas know this, and it's the best economic opportunity in the region that they have access to.
By a
And we want
long
to feed
shot.
their families and give them a good life. And people are like, well, it shouldn't be the best economic opportunity that they have access to in the region. I haven't seen a single person making this argument attempting to improve the economy.
I know, but it is. Like, what do you want to do?
It is.
Yeah.
But it is. It's 7% of the country's GDP. What the? You can't knock out at 7% of the country's GDP industry and expect things to be fine for the people. When you're dealing with the level of poverty that these people live in, that's children starving to death. That's still people dying. You can't say, well, hypothetically, it would be nice if it wasn't the only way they had to make money, but it is the only way they have to make money. And it's actually getting better for them over time. The Sherpas have noted that the amount that they make per year has gone up dramatically over time, especially recently with the extra commercialization of the field. And the number of Sherpas being used has gone up. So that means the number of people making money on this has gone up. And then you can say, okay. Well, they can't be earning that much compared to the local populace, right? Like, why is this so interesting to them? The average annual earnings for a Sherpa are $4,000 to $10,000. And keep in mind, they're only working during climbing season.
Although, like, of course, to anyone here who's thinking, all right, what would you need to pay me to deal with some entitled asshole, probably? Or if not entitled asshole, at least entitled, person who's willing to, an Everest person and risk my life. And how many climbs is a Sherpa doing? Probably 3 climbs a season, I would imagine.
I don't have to look this up.
Maybe just one. But even just one climb, how much would you need to be paid to put your life on the line for that?
Well, yeah, but this is the problem. They are thinking like privileged, people who live in a developed country where they don't have to worry about genuine scarcity. And so they don't understand what they're suggesting when they're suggesting taking away these people's source of income.
Yeah.
And so the point I was making is now for per year, Sherpas are making $4,000 to $10,000. There's the huge bump up from what it used to be. It used to be around $4,000 to $5,000. So it's rising, which is great for them. Now you could say, well, what's the average monthly salary in Nepal, right? To put this in context, it's $230 to $270. That's why they're doing this. And that's an average. Half of the people are making less than that. Or it might not be mean, but you know what I mean, right? Like, and I'd also note here that the minimum wage in Nepal, which is the alternative for a lot of Sherpas, because a lot of the Sherpas are not people with high skill sets. They're acting like, well, why don't they have coding background? Well, they're the group of people who would otherwise be earning minimum wage. The average minimum wage in Nepal, the minimum wage in Nepal is $115 per month. That's the alternative for these people, for a lot of them. And then you could be like, okay, well, what about like top earning professions in Nepal, right? A software engineer in Nepal is making $7,000 per year to $14,000 per year. Consider this is in contrast with the Sherpas, $4,000 to $10,000. So they're earning in the range for a non-skilled profession of the highest earners in their country. Okay? That's to me insane that you would say, oh, people aren't going to on the net suffer if we remove this earning opportunity from them.
Well, so we need to build an escalator and a slide. All right, let's build an escalator and a slide. Let's just fully commercialize it.
Change. Okay, so what we need to do is we bring people to Everest. We're like, okay, now you're entering the Everest Secret Society. You get to base camp. We are going to use AI imaging to create an image of you at the summit. Nobody actually goes up anymore.
No one will know.
Take all the money that you would have spent on all of this useless stuff. We'll give it to Sherpas families and other poor people in Nepal and the families of the Sherpas who died because they don't get that much in their insurance packages.
Yeah.
And we'll send you home and you can brag to everyone.
Or like, set up a luxury hotel in Nepal that's just for the secret society where like, hey, for the month or so that you'd be climbing Everest, do you really want to or do you want to just party with a bunch of other wealthy people for 4 weeks in the
Now we can cover up all the lines. We can cover up all the dump. We can cover up all the bodies. You don't have to worry about any of that anymore because stimulated Everest, everything's dokey, and you're actually contributing a net benefit to society because your money is actually going to making the world a better place.
I feel like maybe Nepal could pull it off, especially if
No,
here's the great thing is no. So like, what if one of the outfits also like an extra expensive package is tragic death on Everest, and Nepal, like the government's in on it. They'll issue the death certificate. Like, yeah, we cremated you.
Tragic death, never.
Yes, because you still like no one would believe it if there was a secret Everest cabal, but like suddenly the survival rate's 100%. Suspicious. No one believes it anymore. So some people go and they never come back. Tragic death. Oh no, this is a big problem. Oh my gosh, so tragic. We need to stop this.
Yeah, they're still like wealthy divorce lawyers. So it's like, okay, you need to disappear.
It's how it becomes a very tragic
Everest
boating
tragic.
accident. And it's a very posh way to die, obviously. Dying in Everest, so sad, so sad. And then of course, but all their holdings were in crypto, and their wallet was on them on the mountain. Fell in a crevice, don't know where it went. Oh, tragic.
Fell in a crevice.
Yeah, fell in a crevice. All that crypto gone forever. So sad. I don't know. That's the real dream, I guess. And because these are all such insecure people who have to be able to say, I summited Everest. They, would.
Steelman the other side of this for me.
Okay.
What net good is gonna come out like to the people who are like, no, I actually like climbing Everest is a good thing for like, and when I say a good thing for my personal development, it needs to be a differentially good thing, a good thing that you could not have achieved by something of equal cost and risk to life, like with less cost and less risk to other people's lives. Thoughts?
Okay. So I really, really want to climb Everest, and I'm talking to you, and you're saying, why are you doing this?
It seems completely selfish.
Completely selfish. And well, I'm saying, well, one, like this is the economy of Nepal. I am supporting it. Two,
well, I'd say then just give the money directly to Nepal. Don't make people risk their lives for you.
yeah, I guess, gosh, this is difficult. Okay, I don't care about Nepal. Screw Nepal. Screw the Nepalese people. Screw their traditions around Everest being sacred, whatever they are. I don't know about them because I don't care because I'm not culturally sensitive, etc. I just want to be the best, and I want to climb the hardest mountain. Although I think K2 is harder.
Yeah, but this is the thing, right? Like you're like, first, it's not up the hardest mountain. Two, it's just the highest status mountain, which again is part of the problem here. And again, you're like, okay, I want to be the best. Why do you need to be the best in this totally pointless way that society respects, but the like reality doesn't respect the fact that you were standing on some arbitrary peak?
And again, there are other ways you can be the very best without trashing the environment, wasting money, and sacrificing other humans' lives.
I wanna be the very best. To catch them is my real
Yeah. One also, a lot of society really doesn't respect. Everest has become one of those things that people now see as quite douchey. So I also don't really understand why I think a lot of people in their childhood, like younger now, I do think in the future, the Everest market will crash because we've reached a point at which the vast majority of the coverage of Everest is like, oh, so many people die on it. It's sort of a grotesque interest in death, or just should and fraud of people loving on how annoyingly long the lines are. And the vast majority of the pictures of the summit of Mount Everest is this massive, massive line of people. So I think the market will crash. I can't steelman it because I really can't. The woman who died that I mentioned at the beginning of this, her whole thing was just this sort of very narrowly sighted, like, I I'm just going to do it. Like she was the kind of person, like she ran for office in Canada. She just did a bunch of things and her life was always like, nothing's going to get in my way. Like you say I can't do it, I'm going to do it. And I think that's a lot of the people who go up there. It's very much that sort of spoiled toddler syndrome of like, they just stubbornly insist that they can and must do it. And then because it is tedious and difficult to do it, I think it can motivate a very specific type of person.
Well, no, and I see them as spoiled toddlers. Well, I see them as worse than that. Like to me, I see somebody, and I've mentioned this in another episode, saying I claimed Everest is like having a swastika tattooed on your forehead. I'm like, oh, I know you're a garbage human being. Thank you for communicating that to me.
You're an emotional fucking cripple. Your soul is dog shit. Every single fucking thing about you is ugly.
But it's not the only category of recreation I see as like that. Like, if I knew that playing video games, like my preferred form of recreation, like randomly killed somebody, like 1 in 10 times I hit a specific key or something like that, or 1 in 100 times I hit a specific key, I'd be like, yeah, I should stop doing this. Like, I might like the video games or randomly killed me. I'd be like, yeah, I should stop. I should at least not be bragging about it. First isn't the only category of this. You know, whether you're talking about free climbing, for example, is another category of this.
Free climbing really freaks you out.
You know, like another one, well, it's interesting that doesn't freak me out as much is dangerous style spelunking. Like,
that freaks, I can't handle.
I've listened to so many stories about people who died in this. And it's always like the dumbest thing. Why did you crawl into a tunnel if you didn't know you were going to be able to crawl back out that tunnel? I like it. It's like, well, you're putting your life in other people's life. Like, do you have nothing to offer the world? Like, you can't even like sit down and try to make yourself somebody who could offer the world something.
It's like you go up to someone and you're like, hey, you've been gifted this one life to try to make it count, to try to do something good for the world. And then they're like, you know what? I think I'd rather shove myself in a hole. And you're like, whoa, wait, excuse me? You'd rather do what? Yeah, I'm going to go in the desert and shove my head in a hole. And you're like, why would you do that? I don't know. I like it. It makes me feel good, gets me off. That's a crazy thing. That's a crazy thing.
Or dangerous types of cave diving, where it's like, look, I don't mind if you spelunk in like a big cave, just explore it and enjoy it. But there is a point where whether it's mountain climbing or cave diving or anything like that, where there is a form of it that is fun and recreational, where the risk to other people or yourself is marginal. And then there's a point where the only reason for what you are doing anymore is to increase the risk.
Well, and part of this, it reminds me, as you're giving me these examples, it reminds me of sexual arousal pathways gone wrong. How, obviously, humans have evolved to have instincts that make them interested in things associated with sex because humans who are not at all interested in those don't tend to reproduce at really good rates. So then they don't really inherit the future. And so there's not a whole lot of us who aren't really into it. But then, there are some people who then have really weird arousal pathways with regard to certain things and they take it too far and they die, like through asphyxiation or through other things, shoving stuff up their butts when they really shouldn't, because that's not really reproductive. And I think that humans also have, and this is a really, really good trait that has built civilization, that has created inventions and amazing things for pushing limits and exploring and, pushing themselves as far as they can go, wanting to prove things to yourself. And that is a good thing. It's just these people are the equivalent in terms of that, like super stimuli, as the person who ends up choking themselves for arousal or, doing a bunch of other things.
The people who die on Everest are the moral equivalent of the person who dies because they put a light bulb up their butt to get off.
Yeah.
Or a gerbil up their butt to get off.
It's called autoerotic asphyxiation. This is my problem with it. The risk reward. It's not good. And I know the reward because I read about it. Like apparently by cutting off the oxygen or something like that, you increase your orgasm until it's 1.5 times as powerful as the one you had the Thursday before last. But is that really that important? I mean, we have a lot of things in this country. It's raining in the forest. There's all kinds of shit we have to think about. Let alone whacking off, that's our big problem. But the risk, good Lord.
Yeah, it's just they take it too far. Like there's a place for that, and you've taken it too far.
Well, no, but you knew. Like The guy who put the light bulb up his butt knew there was a risk at putting a light, but it really turned him on. The guy who put the gerbil up his butt, he knew it was a risk. It created a positive emotional state for him. And he's like, this is more important to me than the risks that this is incurring or the pain that this is incurring others in the case of the gerbil.
Okay, now, Butters, could you bring over Lemmy Winks for me, please?
Sure. Oh, no.
I think that this is when we begin to, as a society, framing the people who indulgently spend the one lives that they are gifted in these really, really selfish ways as the same as the type of person who ends up in a hospital with a light bulb up their butt, then we can lower the people who are doing this performatively. Because a lot of people are just doing this performatively. And yeah, there's going to be some small portion of the population that just can't stop themselves from climbing dangerous mountains or going into dangerous holes or putting gerbils up their butt. But, that is where we can be like, okay, well, you at least understand that everyone sees you as the guy who died putting a gerbil up his butt. But yeah.
Yep. Everest garbage in every respect. Can't understand it. But what is wild is that while I don't personally know anyone who has climbed Mount Everest, we do know, I think we've encountered multiple people, not just your dad, who've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. So people are still doing this to lesser extents. You would have done?
No, I said Everest is the type of thing he would have done if the opportunity had come up at the right age. And I respect my dad. I like my dad, but this is one area where his moral structure is just very juvenile. But it's because he's a first generation, we'll have a separate video on this, which is why are first generation atheists so likely to have aesthetic value systems, hedonistic value systems?
I was going to say, it seems like there was a rise in this kind of behavior as religion ebbed a little bit, I think.
Yeah, because it's not that religion didn't have pointless ways you could challenge yourself, but the pointless ways you could challenge yourself in religion were usually meant to lower negative externalities.
They were broadly pro-social, we could say.
Well, no, or antisocial. They'd say, go cloister yourself in a room and don't talk to anyone for 30 years. That's a very difficult thing to do.
Wait, you know what? No, it is broadly pro-social because it takes the crazy assholes and removes them from society. Come on.
Yeah, we got to tell everyone at Everest, hey, the new thing is, can you get off social media for 20 years? It's so hard.
The challenge, yes, that's how you really know. I love you.
Thoughts I like that. I think that's what we need to be pushing. The new. I think that all of this is sort of downstream. The first generation of news religion didn't really have any sort of a meaningful alternative to it.
Well, and they didn't have some other way to find meaning or achievement in life. And I mean, other religions give you sacraments. You can join religious service, or you could have a family, and you are really maxing it out by doing that. And if you want to get intense, have 10 kids. If you want to get intense, become a nun. There are things you can do. And the problem, I think, with a broadly atheist society is the way now that you max it out is by spending a lot of money or doing dumb shit like climbing Mount Everest.
Well, they coded value, moral value, to their self-perception and society's perception of themselves, rather than any sort of objective or well thought through value system.
Well, and I would argue that a lot of people did things like join religious service or have a lot of kids or do things like that to signal, but at least it harnesses that desire to front and harnesses it for good. People who just gave a lot of money, think about what wealthy families used to do. They used to, the Carnegies, they gave so much, all the libraries and the theaters and all these other things. And then before, they think about what the Medicis did. They built, and there's all this art they commissioned, and they sort of gave things to society. You'd get a fountain in your town or something, and now it's not being spent on something everyone can. I think a lot of that too is driven even by weirdly anti-capitalist sentiment, in that in the past you could become a wealthy benefactor and give to society and be celebrated for it. And now, like, the Chan Zuckerberg initiative wants to, like, end human disease, and people are like, oh, screw you. And maybe that's another issue too, is now because it's not cool to be a patron, you can't even, like, you can't flaunt your wealth in a way that benefits society, because society will hate you for it. And so instead, they're spending it on still, like, doing things like climbing Mount Everest. And that's killing Sherpas, and that's killing other, like, people.
All right, here's another great example. Like the billionaires who all died in that submarine trying to see the Titanic.
Right. Well, because they couldn't possibly, like, found a library, because then people would be like, ugh, rich person. I mean, they still made fun of them, but if they'd done something more public facing that was meant to benefit other people, they would have been criticized for it. And that is, I don't know. I'm just starting to think about this more.
Well, we as a
Now
society
wealthy
need
people
to
are
extol-
demonized for trying to do good, for trying to give to society.
Right. And I think that if we look at the people who are trying to live our value system, right, like billionaires, this is one of the reasons why we, even though, like, there might be reasons to criticize Elon Musk, he's clearly trying to get us off planet, which is like our core goal.
And he's
trying to raise awareness for pronatalism in a way that hurts his ability to make money and stuff like that. He's trying to, like, you really need to cut billionaires some slack if they are broadly trying to do things in alignment with your value system.
Oh, he's trying to set up self-driving cars to drive people around cities. He's trying to set up, like,
which
the
would dramatically lower the number of deaths.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, can you believe this billionaire monster? It's so annoying. But yeah, I think that's another issue though, is if you show that if you use your wealth to try to help society, you're going to be not only not praised, but actively criticized. You're going to start to do stupid, indulgent stuff like climb Mount Everest, or
go on a
just, like,
submarine to the bottom of a
invest endlessly on, like, go, like, on all these ayahuasca trips and just look inward, and then spend all your money on mental health and, like,
But
therapy.
the only way this is averted is through social shaming and through realigning society's perception of individuals who put themselves at these sorts of pointless risks as the guy who died sticking a light bulb up.
Well, and rewarding people who use their resources to give back. Because right now we just punish them.
Yeah, we just punish them. And it's worse than just punishing them. When we praise them, people attempt to punish us.
Oh, yeah. No, so it's very serious. I was just listening to an interview on the Honestly podcast with Mark Andreessen, between Barry Weiss and Mark Andreessen. And Mark Andreessen was talking about this. He was like, there used to be this sort of social contract in America where if you worked hard and built a company and made a lot of money, then you'd get to go to all the fancy parties and you donate money and people would celebrate you and it'd be fun. You know, like, that would be like a good motivator. And now people are doing that and they're trying to give back. Bill Gates tries to give back. Chan Zuckerberg tries to give back. Elon Musk tries to give back. And you know, what Elon Musk gets, like, attacked by the US government and society, and Mark Zuckerberg gets attacked by the government and society. Like, they get hated. You know, people have all these conspiracy theories about Bill Gates and he's a monster. So the social contract has. I have a call with Abigail Schreier. I'm sorry, I have to end the call, but you can end. I'm sorry.
Love you.
I love you too. Bye.
Mountains high, but hearts are small. Chasing glory, watch them fall. Waiting lines and freezing nights. Dollar bills and blinding lights. Footsteps echo empty fame. Rescuers call out your name.